Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. And we're back. Welcome to episode 88 of Time to Teach. Today's episode is entitled Making Time When You Have No Time. This is something I think we all deal with. As educators, we just simply do not have enough time to do all the things that we want to do. And it's also a topic that's really been at the forefront of my mind. And I think because I'm playing with some different things in my classroom this year, we are now kind of, I wouldn't say fully adopting in GSS, but we are definitely dabbling in it and experimenting. I think the idea is eventually we will be adopting in GSS. But as we're going down this path, it obviously leads me to question, how do I fit this in, and how do I create time when I'm already very limited on time? So because I've been thinking a lot about that, I decided that needs to be the topic for this week because it is heavily on my mind. So today I'm just going to kind of share some of how I attempt to include things and manage the time situation. Please know, as always, I am not saying I have all the answers. This is merely a reflection for me, just sharing my ideas. I'm sure there are great ideas out there, and I'd really love to hear them, actually. I'm always looking for ways to improve things. But I did want to share because I have really had to try to look at my schedule and try to fit in more science when I just simply don't have time. And I will not be talking only about that, but different things that I make time for, because that is just always the issue. I also do feel, I've spoken about this before, but in case you are not a regular listener, I am here in Mexico. I am teaching internationally, and I feel that our teaching time, not just feel, it's true, our teaching time is even more limited, I think, than in the States, because we're sharing teaching time with the Spanish teacher. So my Spanish teacher comes in and teaches for an hour. And actually the older grades, because I teach a grade called pre-first, it's in between kindergarten and first grade. So first grade through fourth grade is even more limited for the English teachers, because their Spanish teachers teach an hour and a half. So it's very limited, very limited. I teach from 8 to 9:30, then my kids have recess, and they have Spanish from 10 to 11, and then I teach from 11 to 1:10. So I have to squeeze in all my academic subjects in that area. So it is definitely very challenging. So in today's episode, I will just kind of be exploring a little bit about how I fit it all in. Okay, first thing that I want to talk about that I feel is extremely important is class meetings. And in the past, I was just kind of haphazardly having class meetings when something became really of the essence and very, very necessary. Then I would, we're going to have a class meeting. But I really kind of got to the point where I felt like, no, this needs to be a little more established in the classroom. It needs to be much more part of what we do. And I finally got to the point where I said, you know what, I just have to schedule it like I schedule anything else. Like I have time, I make time for reading workshop, I make time for writing workshop. I need to make time for class meetings. So when I first started doing that, I decided that it would be Friday mornings. That's when we would have it. And that actually helped. So having a planned time for something, in this case, class meetings, but in your case, for anything, you just need to pencil it in. If you create a time and space for it, it will happen. If you do not, it may happen once in a while, but it will probably be accidentally and it won't be as effective. Now, since then, I've actually changed and I no longer do class meetings on Fridays. I've changed it to Mondays. But that's just because we have flag assemblies almost every Monday. Sometimes that changes and then I'll follow the day that we do flag assembly. But since our schedule is already different on Mondays, I'm just using that day to do class meetings, because instead of having 2 days where our morning is a little disrupted and looks different, it just makes it easier. So now I follow it and I do it on Mondays, and I'm actually quite liking it because it's a nice way to start the week with a class meeting and really kind of reflecting on things. So I just pencil it in and it's just part of the day, and I already know it's going to happen, so I don't have to look for, accidentally or unintentionally fitting it in. It has a place in the schedule. So I find that is just something that helps. So find time in your schedule, pencil it in, create it as its own being in your lesson plans, and then it will happen. And I know one thing, before I started officially doing class meetings every week, every morning I will have a little class, like an unofficial class meeting with the kids, and talk about the day and talk about our expectations, remind them of things that I feel we need to be reminded of. And those are typically things that maybe they're struggling with or we are struggling with. But the official class meeting is on Monday. And I just feel like it just works well. And as I was about to say in the beginning, I kind of felt like, oh, but we're taking away from all these academics. Finding a way to bring in some academics. So typically, I will start the class meeting with a read aloud that ties into our topic. And then sometimes, usually because we have one official class meeting, I usually need 2 days to really explore the topic. So the first day it will be like a read aloud and a class discussion. And the next week, when we have our follow-up, it will be, I won't go back to the book, although I will reference the book in our discussion the week prior. Then the next activity might be something that ties in writing or, something like that. So trying to tie in academics is a great way, but also understanding that, even though we might not immediately see it as academic, it's still fully necessary and just as important, and just understanding that it's helping to create those soft skills that are truly, truly important. We really need to make time for it. We really do. So that is kind of my tip for that. Now, as I alluded to, or more than alluded to, directly stated, I'm really trying to include more science this year because of us kind of dabbling in NGSS. So one way I decide to do that is creating science workshop, which I am doing on Mondays. So again, why Mondays? Because of the reasons I just stated. So if there's something that happens at your school, and maybe it's not every week, but maybe it's monthly or whatever it looks like at your school, that might be a good day to bring in some of the other things that you want to do, but you feel you are limited in time for doing, just because it's already a day that things are different, so you might as well run with it. So that's why I kind of decided science workshop. I will follow and do science workshop once a week. And in that workshop, just kind of, I'm really not doing reading workshop or even writing workshop. It's just we go to flag assembly, we come back, we have our class meeting, and then it's pretty much time for first recess. Then they have Spanish for an hour after that, and then back with me. And then I do a half an hour of word work. I mean, that's kind of our reading workshop, but it just only is consisting of the word work part. And then we go into science workshop, and science workshop is from 11:30 to 1:10. So it sounds very long, but there's lots of components within science workshop. But I find just fitting it in on the same day we have flag assembly and our class meeting, it just works. It just works so well. But I do still tie in the academics. So what I've done is usually I will open up science workshop with a read aloud that ties into whatever scientific standard or topic that we're looking at. For example, the last 2 weeks we've been exploring density and things that sink and things that float. So I've had a read aloud that goes with it. So that's clearly, I think we can clearly see where academics and the other areas are tying into it. So, reading, literacy. And then we go into science stations. So I will have science workshop stations that kind of follow that topic. So let's see if I can remember last week's stations. Usually I always have a reading station. So they're still reading. And I include our science read aloud. So they're usually kind of like trade books. And then after I introduce new ones, it just becomes part of the books that they can read from during the station. So it kind of grows over time. As you can see, I just keep adding those read alouds. So there's a read aloud station. There is a station with our TA who is doing an active experiment with them tied into whatever lesson is. Then there's a station with me, and this station is actually a math station, so it's not quite science. But when I think of math and science, I think of them very linked together. So I really see no difference there. It is. It doesn't specifically tie into what maybe the lesson was, but it's all related. They need math skills. And then the fourth station from last week, I feel like I may have to look it up because I just can't remember what that fourth station was. So I'm going to do that right now. Oh, yes. Okay. So the fourth station this last week was a picture, sink and float, and it just kind of showed like an ocean and you can see the wave. And then students were to draw things that can float on top of the wave, and then things that sink, they would draw at the bottom. So and let me kind of go back to my math station that I have within there. Now, the reason why I still do a math station within Science Workshop is because I need the extra time to do science. I also need to be teaching math. So it would be hard to let go of that. So it's, they have a shorter math time, but I'm, still teaching them their new lesson. So that's kind of, doing that has really helped. So what I do is open up with a read aloud that ties into what we're learning. Then we do one rotation of the science stations. Then we go back to the carpet, and then I will usually teach something else related to the topic. So another maybe 5 minutes. This past week it was a brain pop video on things that sink and float. Then they go into their second rotation, go to the next station. Then we come back to the carpet. And I think this time that when they came back the third time, the read aloud was so long that I hadn't actually read the whole thing. So I finished the second half of the read aloud on that third sitting, and then they go and do the third rotation, come back to the carpet, and there was no other new lesson. It was just kind of, my kids are young. They're 5 going on 6. So their attention span and how long they can do an activity is very short. So even when I'm not teaching a new lesson, I kind of get them ready and kind of change it up by still having them clean up the station, then come to the carpet, sit down, and then dismiss them to the last rotation, or last station for the last rotation. So that's how I do it. So fitting in, one day a week I know is probably not the best, but it's what I have time for and what I can fit in. And the idea initially was that I would keep one of those stations in our math stations for the week. So I've not been able to do that yet, but that is the idea. And I do still want to explore more with that. But at this point, it kind of is what it is. But I feel good because I'm doing more science than I did in the past. Now, in the past, I still felt good about integrating science and social studies because all of my read alouds, and this is another way to integrate, all my read alouds are tied into whatever science or social studies we're working on, and we kind of design by big units. So right now we're in a myself unit, so it's more social studies than anything else. Kind of just understanding the self, family, traditions, culture, and then larger communities. So a lot of that is gotten through the read alouds and discussions, but we kind of talked at our elementary section that we're doing great stuff to integrate it, but we do also need to get more of like the experimental science going, which is why we're on this journey. Now, I would also have always had my TA when she works with groups. She will usually with her groups do something that's related to the science and social studies. So I was getting more of that happening in the small group time, but I wasn't really having students go through the whole scientific method before, so that is new for me, and I feel good about including that. So like I say, I'm maybe not there yet, but I'm definitely including more than I ever have, and I feel extremely good about that. Okay, so that's a little bit about fitting in science, and of course, as I'm explaining this, you can be applying that to anything you're trying to integrate into your classroom or make time for. So maybe it's not science, but maybe it's some other thing. Doing one day of a workshop where you're doing stations, and maybe those stations include another academic area, is a good way to include it. Okay, and then the other way that I include things that I really don't have time, it kind of goes along with what I just said. Instead of science workshop stations, just stations in general are a great way to include a variety of things. So I really mix things up a lot. So, reading workshop, if you're familiar with workshop, it's mini lessons at the carpet, and then kids are going to spend time reading to themselves and then partner reading. The way I do it is I teach a mini lesson at the carpet. This is to everyone, something that everyone can use, and then they go off. I have them decide, are you reading to yourself this time? Are you partner reading? They decide. That's the way I do it. I think that kind of diverges maybe a little bit away from the way Lucy Calkins does it, but I like to give some choice as to when they're doing it. So they decide, and then at that time, my TA is working with a group. I'm usually working with a group. There was a year or two that I was experimenting with more conferring during that time, and I did a lot of it, and I like it, and I do still sometimes do that, but I do a lot more small groups, especially right now in the beginning of the school year, where my kids are coming from early childhood, and there's just still a lot of foundational skills we need to build, like letter name, letter sounds, blending and segmenting, working on rhymes. Those are things that we're doing in our small groups, and it's just so very necessary that I just feel like my time is better spent in small groups, focusing on those foundational skills, and then working up from there. So I guess I don't really do a whole lot of stations during that time. It's just they're choosing between read to self or partner reading. Then we come back to the carpet. Well, actually, I should say when we first do our first rotation, it's actually right after shared reading. So I don't even start with the lesson. It's just the shared reading. Then they go off for the first rotation. then they come back to the carpet, then I teach them, and then they go for their second rotation, and it kind of looks the same. I'm with a group, my TA is working with a group, and then students who maybe did partner reading are now self-reading, or if they did self-reading, they're now partner reading, as long as their partner is not working in a group. If their partner is gone or working in a group, they can just do self-reading again. And then math, I do also do the station, so that helps me to fit in more things, and it also helps me to kind of cycle back to other concepts, because I really feel like, like we just don't have enough time, which is why we're talking about this. There's not enough time, so I really have to fit in the time to cycle back to previously learned concepts, as well as working on current concepts. So that's how I do it in math. So basically what I will do is, open up math with a math read aloud. Then they will do a warm up in their journal. And a lot of times I will take a small group, or especially if I see that there were kiddos who were struggling with something, that's the time I will pull them and work with them. The ends of the week, Fridays, I try to use for assessment. So when I'm pulling kids, I'm pulling more for assessing purposes on a Friday. That's just so I make sure that I have time to, go in and assess. And this is not the place nor time for it, but I strongly believe in formative assessment. So it's not the only time I'm assessing. I'm gathering data the whole week, and that's in various ways. But it's just, the end of the week is when it might be a little more formal for me. So I just want to throw that out. Okay, so then after their warm up, then they come back to the carpet. I teach a new lesson. Then they may go off and they may do like an independent activity, or they go straight into stations. And stations, my TA is teaching, but I am not, because I really take the stations time to look at how they're working through the concepts, and I'm getting a lot of anecdotal data. And then also I can see like, hey, this kiddo is struggling, and I can provide extra support. So it's kind of a way for me to differentiate and at least identify who needs more assistance. And what I see happening, I can immediately intervene. But I also know like, hey, those might be the kiddos that I'm going to work with in a small group tomorrow when the other kids are doing their warm up. So that's another thing that I do to help fit in and make a little more time. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I make time. So, looking at your days and your schedule, choosing those days that are already kind of a little weird because maybe you have strange things happening that day, whether, in my case, it's once a week, your case, it may not be, it might be bi-monthly, it might only be monthly, whatever it is. Those are just good days to go ahead and do something different to fit in. Making sure you have a time, designating a day and time, and just including it in your lesson plans. Just, if you're waiting for it to accidentally happen, it likely won't. So we just want to be very intentional and make sure it fits in because we have planned the time for it. And then also, as I stated, working in stations is a great way, especially if you're trying to be a little more cyclical and go back to previously learned concepts and topics. Those are just great ways to do it. Integrating your academics where you can. So like I said, with the science workshop, I still have a station of math going on, and I have a station of reading going on. Having read alouds tie into whatever science and social studies theme that we're working on. All of those things. The last thing that I want to say, this is very important. We do not have a lot of time. This is going to seem very obvious, but I don't know that we do enough of this. Enforcing rules and expectations. Specifically, hand raising when students are sharing. I'm very good at making sure that if someone just blurts out the answer, I don't accept it, because if I did that, we wouldn't have an organized, structured conversation. So I definitely will make sure that we're respecting the rules of, if I want to speak, I raise my hand, I keep a bubble in my mouth. I teach young kids, so bubbles and mouths are very important. So that's something that I help to keep things on topic and keep it somewhat, structured. It's a hard balance because we want to give all students a chance to be heard and a chance to share. So this is also why a turn and talk is really good. Turn and talk, and then you might call out a couple of kids, or if you're really low on time, you might just kind of be like, oh, I heard so and so discuss da da da. I also heard something else being mentioned in a conversation, but at least that way everyone is getting a chance, or mostly gets a chance to share out their ideas. And so that's one way. I just, like you have to enforce those rules. If you teach young kids like I do, young kids want to share everything about everything that has nothing to do with the conversations. And, I hopefully this doesn't come off as rude, because I try to do it as politely as I can. But when I have a student say, oh yeah, I'm going to, my friend's house today after school, which I'll get a lot of that, especially if I allow it, I just go, oh, thank you, but that's not what we're talking about. And if you want to share that with me, you can tell me at recess time. Nobody wants to stay in at recess time to tell me about all those things. So it helps to kind of shut down the off-topic things without being totally rude, and also giving them a time and space when they can share it. And if someone does want to tell me during recess time, I will listen to them. It is a good time because I'm either at recess duty, which I really try to take advantage of that and talk to kiddos, my current students who I used to have. I just think it's a great time to connect and or reconnect with those kids and give them a listening ear if they need it. And some, like kids do, they do need that. I think we feel bad as educators because it's a fine line and it's a fine balance of, how do I make sure that I show interest in my kids and their personal lives and the things that's going on, but also respect that time is limited. So I just think we have to enforce those rules. So I'm very good at that, at kind of politely shutting down off-topic things, because it happens all the time. You'll just get random things of, oh, I did this or that on the weekend. You can also create time and space in your day, if you have time and space, of like a couple of minutes, share with your partner, try and talk something that's on your mind, and then close it down. So, it just, all those things have to be very intentional. But I'm just saying this because I've seen a lot of times when things get way off topic, it's because we just kind of let kids go with this and that, and we don't shut it down, and it just is prolonged. And fantastic that we're giving them that time and space, but it also has to be monitored. So that's pretty much it, you guys. That's really all I do. It's not perfect. I still have the issue of time. It's something I always just wish I had more time for. I'm always thinking I want more time for XYZ, and that time it doesn't exist. So we have to find ways to work out those issues, and those are some of the ways that I've worked it out. That's not to say those are the best ways. That's not to say that those are the only ways. In fact, if you have special tips that you use to include and make time for things you have no time for, I'd love to hear from you. I really would. The best way to contact me is via Twitter. You can tweet to me. I am at TammyJ123. That's at TAMIJ123. Now, before I let you go, I do want to get into wins and fails for the week. So I would say a big win. I might have shared this on a previous episode. I can't even remember, but you guys, I am so impressed with my group this year. Like, they're just getting routine so quickly. It's amazing, and it's really nice to be this early in the school year and feel so close to having things run the way a classroom should run. It's not perfect, but it's just amazing to me. So I'm really happy. Also because I felt like last year there were some challenges and it did take longer, and it's hard. It's really hard trying to bring everything together, but it's coming together. I also have two other wins. Oh, I have a lot of wins this week. Kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, the whole science workshop, because it's new for me, there's kind of a feeling of uneasiness. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm experimenting, I guess, in a way I am being a scientist, but the kids are loving science workshop and it's working. It is working and I'm loving it. And the kids are just they are loving our science workshop when I remind them that, oh yeah, remember today's Monday, and because we have flag assembly, we also have science workshop. I get a lot of yes. They're just so excited, and I love when there's excitement. Not everything can be exciting, but I like when it is, because I do want things to be exciting. So yeah, it is. It's good. It's great that they're enjoying it. And then my third win for the week is my TA and I are actively really, really trying to work on our lines walking, because it's a hot mess. It's always a hot mess. And, anything is going to be whatever you kind of put the time and effort into. And lines have always been difficult, but, I don't know. Maybe I haven't really put that much time or effort into it, but we are really being active and intentional this year about it. My TA and I are. So, my TA kind of started a color system, like a stoplight system, as they lined up: green light. And I'm not really even remembering how she kind of used the system, but basically she used that to help get them kind of trained, and it helped. But they were special colors, and they weren't papers. I think they were plastic. And there's one day a week that she works in first grade, and I'm just, the day that she was gone, I didn't know where they were. I couldn't get it. So I was like, well, I need to have a system that can be consistent and that we can do with her without her. So I kind of decided, well, I guess what we'll do is start keeping tally marks and, kind of recording whose line really was able to get in line quickly and stay in line and walk nicely down the hall. I mean, I'm sure people will have feelings about competition and things like that, but you know what? It works. It also works. So I have feelings as well about that, and I just really think that those things can work, and they do work. So we kind of kept tally marks throughout the week, and the line that has the most tally marks, and yes, they could technically tie, and that's okay too. The idea is we want nice lines, not walking haphazardly through the hall, because that's also, a safety concern. So nice lines. And well, we had a line one, actually, because we have two lines. We go by number order. Line one had the most tally marks, so they won. And we already do kind of an economy system in our class, so the kids earn Starbucks for various things throughout the week, and they use that to pay to go to the bathroom, and they can use that to enter Friday Fun Time, and purchase tickets at the end of the week. Well, now we decided the line winner at the end of the week, it's a special, powerful Starbucks. It's red. It's worth 5 instead of just 1. And they are so excited by this. And this is our first week actually going through that process and having winners. And they're just so excited about it. So that is a win. And their lines have been looking very nice. Instead of being blobs and being really a safety hazard, because it can be, especially let's say there's an emergency. I'm always thinking about, what if there's an emergency? Like, the way we practice things are the way that we're going to do it. And we need to know how to safely walk through the halls. We really do. So, so there's that. So that is it. Fail for the week. There aren't any major fails for the week, but I just am kind of feeling like this week I was just very tired, and I almost am wondering if my body is fighting something that I'm not truly aware of, because I've also been congested, and there's really been no reason to be congested, because it's been even after I haven't eaten in a while and I've not drank anything that would congest me. and I've been feeling very tired. So I'm kind of thinking I might be fighting something off. Of course, this is not a fail that I can really do anything about aside from really take care of myself, which I do. I'm very good at doing things that are going to help me feel better. But anyway, I think I might be fighting something off, so I just need to make sure I get enough rest this week. Okay, you guys, that is it. That wraps up episode 88. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you would like to share about a tip you have to make time when you have no time, I'd love to hear from it. Or if you just want to reach out and connect anyway for no other reason than just reaching out and connecting, Twitter is the best way to reach me. Again, it's at TammyJ123. Until next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.